Hi.
Evening. Hello. How we doing?
Uh, you want to take a guess who my harshest critic in the world is?
You.
Yeah.
Right. You were saying something about you tried Civ, which I
Oh.
thought you might get hooked on immediately.
mm,
Civ 5 for everyone. Here's taste.
Yeah, yeah. What is it? I think now this is not fully worked out in my head, so I'm going to have to sort of stream of consciousness and work it out as I say it. But there's a strong impulse to hide from what hide from the vision of the infinite that lurks deep in my psyche through drowning it in stuff. And that, and the, like, I've never got into games because I don't like the way. I think what I experienced with playing Civ today was the hook of, oh, just do this thing, do this thing, do this thing, and there's that graphics and always another thing to do, and the rapid feedback of it, and it's oh, a dopamine loop that once you finally get off it leaves you feeling more drained, I found. And while on it, it felt like running on a hamster wheel. And I think I've stayed away from alcohol all my life from a in one sense, from a sense that I'm vulnerable to the hide from the hide from the world, hide from the struggles by drowning it in dopamine, short-term dopamine, and uh, fighting out of that. And like I played the game both this morning and this afternoon, and it left me feeling very in my head, like not present for an hour or two afterwards, like sort of zoned out while driving. And I've stopped playing the game to go to an Aikido lesson, and I felt very distracted while doing it. I couldn't concentrate, and there may be
That's
a
an
skill
interesting
aspect.
thing.
Yeah, there may be a skill aspect in terms of learning how to mode switch between gaming and other, but
Well,
mm,
perhaps, but I would also say that you're a kind of new gamer.
mm,
I would imagine that that time is a lot more mentally taxing than it would be for someone who plays games often.
mm,
Like you jumped into one of the most complicated games there are and played it for a few hours. You had to think about every decision. You had to read all of the text to understand what you were doing in a lot of
I had
senses.
played it in Age of Empires a little bit as a kid, so I knew the a few of the basics. And once I and it's on easy mode, so it's not particularly taxing. And most
Okay.
of it was doing the tutorials. Oh no, that was last night and some of this morning.
I feel like there's a few things here. The first thing that came to my mind was you're being very selective about the things that you let trigger the dopamine reward system in your brain. Like you want to keep it clean from things that would activate it that don't have some intrinsic value to your life, I'd say. Like you don't want to touch alcohol because you know your brain will reward you for doing it, and then that's a dopamine loop. And you find the dopamine loop for things that are not productive to be something to avoid.
There is that, but there's something deeper in the sense of the people who drink to hide from emotions, or
Yeah.
who, and I suspect that you know what I'm talking about here, based on some
Yeah.
things you said before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I've got
yeah.
a yeah.
I I probably have enough of a foundation, as in I'm sufficiently matured enough without alcohol that I wouldn't be drawn in deep into that if I tried it out. Like a couple of drinks, just find out what it's like with in a trusted environment and so on. But at the same time, that sense of escapism that
Mm.
there's a tension between wanting to run away from all that sense of infinity in the back. Like, oh,
You might need to define that better.
well,
This is
it's a
interesting because this kind of relates to that mild existential crisis I had a couple days ago. I sent you
hmm,
that message about. When you say that infinity, it feels like to me what you're trying to get at is the question of what to do given the situation of the world that you're in.
it's not even a specific thing. It's like if you think of or imagine complexity that is utterly beyond the realm of comprehensibility. Like start at a single
Mm,
atom. Here's a molecule. Here's a cell. Here's just they're trying to conceive of that, or like even like railway lines converging at infinity. Like that's got a hint of it. Like I think cosmic horror is the term for it that's thrown around. There's that infinite depth
yes.
or like the sense of swimming in a deep ocean. And it's like I don't know what's below me. It might be a shark, it might be a kraken, it might be nothing.
Is it the
It's
ocean
just
itself that gives you this sense of terror, or is it the question of how to behave in it?
it's the attempt to perceive it, and it's not so much the blankness, although size, infinite size or cosmic scale size is a thing of all of its own, but it's a perspective issue, I think. Like if you have a picture of a person, then it's like, okay, here's a person. If you have a picture of a person blown up to show their individual cells, that's incomprehensibly huge. And so you just can't conceive of it. And then you take that one person in pale blue dot photo from Voyager or whichever space probe it was. It's like, and then you conceive of the level of complexity there. I think one way it came to mind was like, if you have order and chaos, and you've got total order without complexity is just blankness. That's just death
Mm,
in a sense. Where chaos without order is a different sort of oblivion. Like that's an oblivion that eats.
yeah.
And the middle is where there is complexity rather than mere chaos. And it's like there are governing rules, but when you try and perceive complexity that's beyond the horizon of your potential to understand, then you see it as the chaos. It's yeah, it eats.
It's too much for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it can
I don't mean you, I mean, like, all
yeah,
of us. Yeah.
yeah. And there's a part of me which if I let myself drift into that, it's interesting that it's let myself drift into
Mm,
it rather than look into it. If I don't keep my focus, if I don't stay grounded, if I don't touch grass, so to speak, then it's like zoom out, and even just the complexities of a single life, the fractal complexity of a society, of the number of connections and interactions and consequences, and it builds until it's overwhelming and all consuming.
okay.
And I walk back from that.
I have this experience too. I actually kind of had a mild panic attack, um, on farm with my friend, which was a bit of a strange moment a couple days ago. But you keep describing the complexity, and I get that is part of it, but for me, it's about the why of it. Like you're trying to observe all of this complexity, and that's the thing that's giving you this kind of existential terror, whatever
Mm.
you want to call it. Why are you trying to observe the complexity? Why are you trying to encapsulate it all? For what purpose?
I think my initial answer of that I just drift into it is missing something. It's yeah, it's like there's the other side of that tension. There is a joy in diving into the chaos to find its order. And it's like an unbalanced seesaw. It's like it can flop one way or the other. Where a lot of people, it's sort of relatively stable in the middle. Where mine seems to flop one way or the other.
Why do you find that there is that sense?
Of
Why is
finding
there, yeah, why is there joy there? Why is there meaning probably there for you?
it's transcendent. It's like there is
Why?
order that is beyond what I can conceive of,
Okay,
and
but why? Like, what good is that?
it's emotional.
Is that preferable to not order?
It's not a hmm. It's it is definitely preferable to not order, but it's preferable in the same sense that continuing to breathe is preferable to not breathing. It's not a
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. It's like
Um, I have a strong sense that I don't have a good grip on exploring this idea, this area.
hmm,
Um, it's something I tend to avoid in myself because it brings on a lot of a depressive episode, effectively.
hmm.
Um, I can ask questions to guide you to some of the places that I've gone in thoughts there, but I'm not entirely sure that that's where you should go or where would be helpful. I could also tell you my where my thoughts go, but I think your comment about it is preferable in the way that breathing is preferable. In my mind, it's tied to a survival instinct. When you think on a grand scale, when you're the kind of person who can think on a grand scale, whether that's tens of thousands or hundreds or millions of years, and you have a you have a preference for things going well for humanity. And I think that's tied into survival instincts, continued expressions of genes, something like that. That's my evolutionary basis for it. The
Yeah,
amount of complexity is so overwhelming that it's paralyzing because no one mind could ever possibly navigate or create a path through that could sustain life, especially your own life or your own kin's life or your own culture's life, and perhaps even your own species.
my initial reaction is now I'm not saying that that's not the physiological root of it, but it's almost a creationist perspective. It's
Your one.
coming from an emotional source. Yeah, it's like if
Mm.
there is order on the scales of existence that we can't comprehend, then that means it's sort of like not three body problem, as
I don't
recently popularized.
understand the three body problem that much, but from what you're saying, this sounds familiar to what we discussed last time.
Mm,
The idea that you have to believe without evidence effectively, that a certain sense of acting in the world, in existence, is preferable to another. It's like a fundamental belief that the exploration of the chaotic unknown, and through truthful exploration and truthful action and truthful speech, you can create ordered existence that is preferable to the chaotic other state. That process is has to be held as a fundamental belief in order to act in the world. So when you say that you have a feeling that it's a creationist feeling coming through, or a thought, that strikes as very true to me.
Yeah. Like the idea that there is fundamental order there is almost a something that you need to believe in order to not go insane in the face of it.
Yeah.
And it's like when I said three body problem, it's like, and that's if you have three bodies orbiting, then uh, it's so sensitive to initial conditions and any perturbations that it is utterly unpredictable. So you can never have a stable orbit of three similarly sized objects. Like the sun's so massive that it dominates the solar system. But if you have three stars orbiting, two stars can orbit stably, three stars, who knows what the hell will happen. And so if there's a planet in the mix, that planet's going to go through hell and freeze and so on. But if there is an order to the chaos that underlies, or the complexity that underlies what we interact with, then that's reassuring. But my mind went down the track of why that level of overwhelming complexity is so close for me. As
Mm.
I think I'm only a step or two on the order side of that anyway. Like I'm aware of the complexity enough that if I'm not holding myself back from that or
Ah,
reminding myself of it, that I sort of
you're aware of so many things that are out of your control.
mm,
Like when I had my moment a couple days ago, I had a moment of thinking about the scale of the problems that humanity faces.
mm,
I was thinking about one problem and then another, which is what I do on a day-to-day basis. But I had a moment, I looked up at the moon and the sky, and I thought about the galactic level problems that we're facing. And then I thought about all of the local level problems that we're facing, planetary scale, country scale, culture scale, and had a moment of like listing.
mm,
And every single one of those problems is well beyond, it seems well beyond current humanity's capacity to solve.
mm,
And at that point, it's overwhelming. There's so much out of my control. How could I possibly, in this moment, have any pretense of control or influence, positive influence perhaps, on the direction of the future?
yeah,
And following from that, okay, therefore, what do? Do you A, give up and ignore everything and live your own life for your own reasons, some form of hedonism, or even not, but just shut off, switch off, and not pay attention to the bigger scale?
mm,
Or, which is what most people do, or you decide that you need to act in order to improve things. And then immediately you land in the place of, okay, well, which action is preferable? Of all the things I could potentially do with my time, with my life, which thing would be the best thing to do? And right now, I don't think that's an answer that can be computed by an individual.
mm,
And leaves me paralyzed
yeah,
in the face of all this complexity. How could I possibly believe that I could act and change the chaos into order and have it be good?
mm,
And then
yeah,
that's the religious answer of you kind of just have to believe that if you behave in the right way, then it will be good,
mm,
and then cede the rest to the transcendent.
mm. It makes me think of I looked up what those 12 steps that Alcoholics Anonymous use, and they've been adopted by many addiction things. And
Mm,
like, it, I forget the precise number, but like half of them are referencing a higher power.
mm.
And it's like they leave that definition explicitly out there or explicitly undefined, but
Yes, yeah, I think it's
uh,
something like an 80% success rate for Alcoholics Anonymous that have religious tones and religious messages in them.
mm,
And if you take that out, which obviously some groups have tried to do, and do like an atheist version, it dropped to like 20%. It
mm.
just doesn't work. That says a lot about people. I think whether we want to believe or not, I think it might be a necessity for most people's existence.
I think it says a lot about the reality we inhabit, which is
Yes,
substantially built of what we are here. So we inhabit
yeah,
the reality that's primarily in here, and then
we're religious creatures.
yeah, all the metaphysical complexity aside,
Yeah,
but yeah,
we have a
there's
reality within our own psyche, and
mm,
regardless of what is objectively true in existence, if we don't adhere to the reality and the rules effectively that are innate to us through evolution, we will make things worse,
mm,
which is sort of the argument against people who are trying to reshape the image of humanity in whatever their ideology wants them to.
mm.
They are trying to replace the natural rules with their own.
I was listening to a meaning wave
Mm,
this evening. It was a Jordan Peterson one about the tarantulas.
don't know that one.
He was reading from Nietzsche or talking about some stuff Nietzsche had wrote about uh, radical equality and how when you strip away any fundamental differences, and there are certain um, apparently fundamental differences that do not stand up to examination, such as race-based differences, where people of this race are fundamentally better than people of that race. Like that's been proven false, totally. But then to take away all distinctions of value of right action and wrong action and so on,
Yeah,
then so Nietzsche had described the people who would act from that place as tarantulas, driven by a desire for revenge, basically, where revenge
yeah,
is what they think of as
yeah,
justice.
yeah. Power.
And yeah, and there was the some protests around town today. Well, one protester drove past and a bunch of bumper stickers and so on, free
Really?
Palestine. And it's like that's a complex issue, and I guarantee it's more complex than those people are conceiving of
No,
because
they're just there because the algorithm that is half controlled by the CIA and the other half controlled by the Communist Party told them what to believe and told them what to do, and they listened.
yeah,
Like, we've had this argument in our culture for I don't know how many years, maybe since Kant or whatever, but the argument has been, are there inherent differences in ability between people?
mm,
Are some people more skilled than others? Are some people more capable than others? Are some people smarter than others?
mm,
And the answer effectively is yes. If you answer that way, you're probably a right leaning person. If you answer the other way, you're probably not.
mm,
It's that joke of you ask someone, um, are some people better than others? And the conservative says yes, and the liberal starts making a waffling speech about how to try and get in all of the exceptions.
Mm.
Rather than agreeing to the thing, they say, "Well, yes, but not all, not everyone, and the averages don't yeah." But my point is, when you undermine the idea of meritocracy, that the people who are the best at doing something are the people who should be rewarded for doing that thing the most, you get
Mm.
into situations where people like that you drove past in the street, who don't understand anything about the history of that region, the forces at play, the manipulations on what they believe, what they know, their worldview is, I would say, almost entirely controlled by special interest without them knowing. They vote and they control the direction of our countries.
Mm.
That doesn't sound like a free democracy to me at all. My point is, and this is, one of my controversial ones, is everyone doesn't vote on which surgery patients need.
Mm.
The doctors do, the people who know what's going on do. Now, I'm not suggesting that only politicians should be allowed to vote. That's kind of dumb, but we have to bring back into our society some form of discrimination on ability, on intelligence, on character, even. Who defines that? Lots of problems. I get that, but we've we've had this notion that you cannot discriminate against people. Discrimination bad. But discrimination is where you say this thing is good and that thing is bad. And we're all concerned about the people getting thrown in the bad category, but we forget that we've just done away with the entire idea of good by criticizing the process that says this thing good, that thing not good. And just because something is not good for this task doesn't mean it's not good for something else. It's
It's
not
easy to
wholehearted and hmm?
it's easy to think of the ways that can go wrong because
Mm,
those are top of mind in today's collective
yeah.
psyche. I think we've forgotten how to work that system well because we don't want a
Mm,
situation of what is it, two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner
yeah.
by vote, and it's like no, there's something wrong there.
Yeah.
But
And the
at the same
question is,
time,
if you're
yeah,
going to take away the vote from someone in that equation, how do you know that you won't end up taking away the sheep's vote?
mm,
And that's the problem.
yeah,
I think these kinds of things are going to end up happening to us. Mm. There's a chance that they'll end up happening to us whether we like it or not. And that might be one of the best things that happened. What I mean is that I see our nations going, Western nations in particular, United States first. I don't know how much the other Western nations will follow suit, but probably they'll bend over pretty quickly as soon as military force gets involved. I think Western nations are going to become authoritarian, but I think the direction in which they are going to become authoritarian is up for toss at the moment.
mm,
I think we could find authoritarian in a almost corporatist way, the kind of
like
way that
fascism in the
no,
technical
no,
sense.
no, no. In my eyes, fascism is more run from the government end of things.
Ah,
I more mean that government does as corporations say,
mm,
and the corporations act outside of the borders of that nation in a multinational sense. And whatever government of whatever nation sort of becomes a vassal state of whichever corporation happens to be influencing it, which is not far
mm,
off where we are,
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
but I could see it getting a lot more explicit and a lot less. Well, it's already not really hidden anymore.
Hmm. I wonder if, like, if you have a, say, 20% of the population who are tasked with making the decisions. Now, say half of people in the current population don't really care anyway. They'll have
Mm,
their issues that they think about, but they don't really dive into the politics. They don't dive into the reasons for it. It's like, which party ticks my box? Or that one ticks my box on my issue. Okay, I'll go with them. Whether it's um, abortion rights or pro life or whether it's guns or whatever. It's like, who ticks my box? Tax cuts? Okay, I'll vote for you, and so
yeah.
on. But the key thing being that whoever's making the decisions must suffer the consequences of their own decisions.
Yes.
Because if we take that out, then it's all going to go to hell. And we've already got a lot of that.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna say that's our situation pretty steadily.
Because how
Like
many of the
the
decisions actually go to the average
well,
voter?
even yeah, say for the politicians, they'll vote for go to war, and they'll never go to war. Their kids will never go to war. Their grandkids will never go to war. They'll vote to indebt all of our nations, but they'll never pay a cent for it,
Mm.
and they don't care about that. And then you go even a step further, and you have the thing where women en masse are voting for hawkish military foreign action that's edging us close to World War III, and they're exempt from the draft.
Well, there's efforts afoot to change that, so I don't know how far they'll get.
Well,
Whether that's a good idea or not.
no, it's not actually.
Yeah.
I don't care how much they fucked us over; they still need to be protected.
Mm.
Um, there's so much chaos going on, and there's so many directions things could go.
Yeah.
But I think it's either going to become ultra nationalist and traditional, and ultra conservative with actual willingness to use government force to enforce that on the populace, or it's going to go the opposite way, and it's going to be the sort of globalist, wokist agenda that's kind of half communist, but really in the pockets of the corporations, and that's the other half of the aisle.
There was one prediction speculation that I saw based on, what was it? There've been many sort of cultural subcycles over the past few hundred years of so alternative spirituality. I'm using that term very loosely, but things grow up. People dabble and then decide that they don't want to put the effort into developing their own consciences, developing their own consciousnesses. They don't want to put the effort in, so they look for an easy route and end up in demonolatry. And then that fades out and they switch to hard Christian of whatever the current flavor is. That's a pattern that's repeated several times, and that's currently having another
Okay.
repetition. And
What was
in
that
the
word you
same
mentioned in the middle? Something or
demonolatry,
other. Yeah,
um, basically demon worship or summoning to try and get the universe to give you goodies.
that's a weird pattern. To flip from that to hard Christian is an interesting observation. God, I'd love to dig through a psyche of someone who's gone through that transformation.
Well, it's the same thing that happened with the hippie movement, where they utterly rejected it to outside appearances, then crashed and burned mostly, and then came back 110% to totally square office life.
Yeah. Yeah, and those who managed to hold on to their views throughout that time generally just believe the same thing as Christianity with different labels.
Mm. Well, a lot of the people who go into the demonolatry route apparently, if
These
you
powerful
look,
people.
No, no. Well, I wasn't making that connection. It was
Okay.
Christianity with values inverted. It's the same philosophical structure. You've just switched a few. You've
Mm.
flipped it upside down, flipped a few things over, but it's the same structure. Whereas if you look at the people who uh, stick with it or weren't part of that pattern, they're the people who are like, okay, I'll follow Thor and Odin and the Norse gods. And that's a different pattern entirely. It's not just an inversion or a reflection, it's a totally different pattern and path. And then you've got the Hellenistic, following the Greek gods and so on. You've got various forms of paganism that aren't merely inversions of Christianity or evil, they'll be my good type things.
I feel like
Taking,
they're halfway.
I think there are independent paths there that are going their own way without being sort of let me show you how bad I can be. And I'm
Oh,
specifically
agreed.
referring, yeah,
I'd
I'm specifically
I'd say
referring
it's
to the
like a scale.
ones, yeah, yeah,
And the
but
way
the
the
ones
way I
that
see
are
it,
like,
yeah, it's an argument, well, not an argument, a discussion I had with my wife not too long ago.
mm,
I kind of believe that there's only really two ways to look at the world,
mm,
and the one way is the way that I've been espousing through Christianity, which is that existence is set up in such a way that if you act in a good way, and we all know what that is, I'm not
mm,
gonna pretend on that one, that good things, that the best possible thing could come out of that if you acted in the best possible way.
mm,
That good leads to good. And the same
the
on the
idea of
bad side. If you do bad
karma
things
exists.
and you know that, and then you get
Mm,
a relatively, as in it's relative to how evil an action you commit, effect on existence.
mm,
Okay, you can believe that, or you can believe that nothing matters.
mm.
But there's no such thing as good and evil, and you can do however you please.
Or there are cheats to get out of it or something. It's not fundamental.
Yeah, well, I think that's the same thing. That it
Mm,
doesn't matter. That I
yeah.
could do an evil thing, and it may affect some people, it may not. It's totally random. It doesn't matter. Or as long as it's good for me, which I still think the fundamental thing is the universe is unfair and it's set up in such a way that good people don't get good reactions and bad people don't get bad ones.
Mm,
So therefore, why would I be good? I could just be bad and get stuff from me because bad people seem to get things that are good. I think that's the two stories.
mm.
And as far as I can tell, a lot of the paganist beliefs are rationalizations of the second story
Second
because a
story
lot
being
of
the one being
the
the,
it doesn't matter one because from what I know, it's halfway. It's I think it's to step away from that side of things towards the singular truth version, but it's not quite there. A lot of it is justification of action through power.
I see it
A
as a
lot,
different direction. It's like if one of
some
those,
of it, some of it is the building blocks
mm,
of um, rather than having the fundamental principle and going off that, having like an instantiation of it around nature. You behave in this way with nature, nature likes it. Behave in this way with the sea likes it. You behave in this way in war, and war likes it.
mm,
And it's like pieces of the puzzle rather than unifying them into a single philosophy.
mm,
And then some of it is because there's a lot of pagan beliefs. You can't throw every single one of them into the same category. Some of it I see as another will to power,
mm,
like some of the figures being worshipped, being war hero kind of figures.
mm,
They had honor and they had glory, and that's because they took what they wanted from those who were unable to defend themselves, and that's what made them great and why they should be venerated. And if I believe that, then I can take what I want from other people in glory of that thing. and then I get my consequences, and I can justify doing the evil thing.
Mm.
It spoils without the guilt. Oh, that's such a basic way of explaining it, but I don't know how many times I've been through this.
Mm.
There's a hell of a lot of complexity in the progression from paganism to monotheism, as I see it as a progressive track. But I think fundamentally there's a divide between a belief in consequences of our actions meaning anything or mattering.
Mm.
And as far as I'm concerned, the other side of the spectrum is simply justification to indulge in hedonistic pleasures and not have concern for the consequence.
Mm. I see that as sort of an independent variable to the poly versus monotheism axis.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I made that way too simplistic. I'd say that there is a there's a piece of that in there, but it's a far bigger subject, and I shouldn't have lumped them in together.
Mm. But to circle back to the bit that I had next in my head for mentioning, so
Mm.
there was that cycle of uh,
Oh, yeah, 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 I got you. Yeah.
flipping to the opposite side of a value spectrum, you could say, flipping from demonolatry to Christianity in the past. And the person who was referring to this was also pointing out that he expected the same thing to happen with the hardcore wokists converting to Islam, or at least some
That'd be
large
great.
proportion.
That'd be great.
It'd be order where they're currently in chaos,
Oh, it'd be great. It'd be amazing for humanity. Yeah, no doubt.
as long as they don't go full Sharia law, because there's some
There's negative
bad
aspects of that, but I
manifestation.
still think it's preferable to communism.
Yeah, if we look right to that end, yeah, if we set those as the opposite ends of the scale,
Yeah.
one,
I have more in common with the Islamist than I do with the atheist,
mm, yeah,
because one will lie to my face in attempt to take everything I have and kill me. And the other one I have shared beliefs through different interpretations that still believes in the glory of a transcendent being.
mm,
Now, I have some issues with some of the things they do and act, but in a certain sense, they're kind of militaristic Christianity.
mm,
And as far as my belief goes, Christianity is a little bit dickless. It's got no fight left in it. It's
mm,
not got no aggression, and that's wrong. It's I think the ideal would be somewhere in between.
mm.
Um, a
There's
bit
also
of
the
force behind Christianity, but not going as far as Sharia.
mm,
And
but
obviously, that's a really hard balancing act, and perhaps why they go that far.
mm,
And I would say a lot of the reason they go that far is an antidote to how far we've gone the other way.
mm,
I think the more atheist we become, the more degenerate we become, the more authoritarian they will as a
mm,
defense.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also if we're comparing communism and hardcore Islamism, as in the end at the ends of the spectrum, communism is one versus or one versus one, where the one is state and people, in a sense. It's a unified sort of destruction of each other, where Islamist is, practically speaking, far more tribal of lots of individual groups fighting each other.
I don't fear the centralization of power.
Mm,
I fear the ethos that drives the system that has the centralized power.
mm,
You may disagree with the morals of the Islamists, and obviously, I've said before they go too far with Sharia law, but they have an authoritarian state whose sole purpose is to maintain in what their eyes is a moral state
Mm. They have
where,
rules, at least.
yeah, what we you said before is there's like the Christianity type of the spectrum, and then there's like the inverse, which is the evil is good thing. You have
Mm.
good is good and bad is bad, and then you have evil is good and bad is good and good is bad, whatever. As far as I can say, that's communism. Communism is the totalitarian enforcement that everything good about existence is something that should be punished, and everything horrible about human nature and existence is something that should be rewarded.
Mm.
And that, as far as I can tell, is hell itself. And the opposite of that, whether that's an entirely totalitarian Shia nation, at least there, good is good and rewarded, and evil is evil and is punished.
And you may
And you
disagree on the
can,
definitions there, but they are
exactly,
defined.
you can say they go too far on this side of thing, and this thing I think should, the line should be shifted a bit. Perhaps it's too far that way, and this thing should be changed. Da 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 da. Sure, but the fundamental ethos of good should be rewarded and protected, and evil should be crushed and destroyed, and those things actually having some bearing on reality of what evil
Mm.
and good actually is, that's preferable
Mm.
to punishing the innocent with torture and giving all of the riches and spoils of the nation to all of the murderers and rapists.
Mm.
That's preferable. And I would honestly prefer it if the woke people all became Islamists.
Mm.
The other half of that is they might actually become Christian
That's true. A lot of them are
because,
focusing on how evil Christianity is, and it's like what you contemplate, you imitate.
yeah, that might flip. If it's going to
Mm.
flip, it might flip that way because it's within the nation. And the
Mm.
other half of that is, as far as I can tell, weak Christians aren't really Christian anymore. They kind of become the wokey people. I think there's a filtering process going on there, and I think that Christianity is being boiled down to the most violent defenders of it,
Mm.
and I think it might come back in a much more aggressive form,
Mm.
especially if people start flipping. Like, as far as I can tell, those who stand strong on the Christian side of things are more aggressive than they used to be. By necessity, they have to be to stand up for what they believe, because you're not just allowed to believe it anymore. You have to
Mm.
defend it. It could go either way, but honestly, I think both of those would be good, which is almost the same thing I was saying before. The belief that the West itself is likely to go authoritarian, and that could be authoritarian communist, or it could be authoritarian nationalist traditionalist.
Mm.
And both of those are authoritarian crackdowns on the populace with restrictions on freedom, second freedom and freedom of expression and behavior in public and da 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 da. But I would 100% prefer one of those to the other.
Mm.
Even if it was as far away as monarchy, at least if it had good values, that's preferable to a free horror show.
Mm. I like the fact that this discussion is not uh, as abstract and idealistic as a lot of our discussions. I think both are needed, but like oh,
Is it not?
in the sense of trying to articulate the structure by which we will get things as right as possible is one thing.
Mm.
Trying to say, here are a bunch of bad options. That one's better than that one. Like that seems like
Yeah,
the world we live in.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's like, do you want Trump or
Well,
Biden?
well, there was that comment. What was the guy's comment? Nietzsche. No, not Nietzsche. It was Freud. In a massacre, there's no decent place to stand.
Mm.
Like, mm, yeah, but there's certainly worse places to stand.
Mm.
In a massacre, I can look at all of the places that are absolutely horrible to stand, and look at another place and be like, that's less bad. I'll stand there.
Mm.
There's no good place, but there's sure as shit is worse places.
Yeah,
And
it's like
something
that
Peterson
guy.
always said is that it doesn't matter how horrible your situation is, there's always something stupid that you could do to make it worse.
Mm, yeah, like that guy in the US come to mind, Kyle Rittenhouse, I think.
Ah, what a
He,
hero. Love him.
yeah, well, he went there with a gun, entirely legally and so on, to this
Mhm.
demonstration, wanting to protect and defend. He ended up being backed into a corner by someone
Yeah,
with a gun and having no choice but to defend himself by shooting the guy.
I don't think he had a gun. I think he tried to
I
take
thought,
his.
oh, was that it?
Yeah, he was running away. I remember the video because I watch it every now and
Hmm.
then. Still on YouTube, which I gotta give them credit for. He's running away and they assault him from behind, they knock him to the ground. Guy jumps on top of him to grab his gun and he shoots him. He gets up. Another guy, no, you're right, the second guy had a gun. Another guy
Mm,
draws from his back hip and runs at him. He shoots him too. And I think he had shot a third person while he was on his back who also tried to jump on him.
mm,
I think that was the three people.
yeah. It's like you step back and say, okay, he shot three people. I don't think all of them
Hmm.
died, but it's like that's a bad place to be.
Well,
Being the guy who was running at him trying to attack him, that's a worse place to be.
I don't know if it's a bad place to be. Like he was defending gas stations from people who were trying to burn them and light them on
Mm,
fire. He had medical kits and was providing medical aid to people, and he was protecting, was it like a car yard with a bunch
mm,
of friends? He was trying to protect other people's property that he didn't know
mm,
and trying to provide first aid to other people that he didn't know. Like it reminds me of there's a bunch of stories in America's history like that, like the LA riots and the roof Koreans.
mm,
And as far as I'm concerned, those kinds of people are heroes. Like they stood their ground and they defended their property from people who wanted to destroy it. I don't care what your reason is. They're in the right.
mm.
And if they
It's
have to
just,
shoot people to defend their lives or their property, I think that should be celebrated and not punished.
mm. It just the thing that came up in my head was that if you have conflict is bad, death is bad, then there's one perspective on that, and that's what I was
Yeah.
holding or embodying
Everything is
before.
permissible.
Sorry?
If conflict and violence is bad, then anything anyone else does is permissible, because the only way to stop behavior you don't like is through conflict and violence.
Mm.
So there
And that
can't ever
comes
be
with,
a line.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that it comes with risk to yourself, and it's like the idea of a good death. Like, what's worth
Uh,
me dying for? If something is worth me dying for, and as in this case, Carl Rittenhouse, he went into an environment that looked a bit dangerous, and then it became steadily more dangerous,
hmm,
and he was aware that his life was at risk. And so I was like, okay, this is a situation where my life is at stake. And then the extension of that is who dies, me or you? If there's someone attacking,
and I have a preference.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And if I'm, what is it? It's kind of like or related to the idea of yeah, combatants and non-combatants. If you make yourself a combatant, if you take on the other guy as a combatant, then you put your life on the line as he has put his life on the line in the conflict. And there are less dangerous conflicts and more dangerous conflicts, but it goes up to that point where nothing is off the table all the way to death.
Yes, I think that implies an equal footing where both people are morally equal, just the way that you stated it. I think if you violate someone's rights, your life is forfeit if that is necessary to prevent you from violating those rights. Like if you threaten someone else's person, you threaten their property, I think they have a right to put you down.
Given clear and present threat.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, if it's
Yeah, it's like,
reasonable.
this
Yeah.
isn't lynch mob, this is,
No,
uh,
no, this is someone else's on your property
mm,
or armed to the teeth aiming at you outside it.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, there was a case I heard about where what was it? It was someone talked about it on Joe Rogan, and got turned into a clip. A guy who was an ex-marine or something, who collected
Mm.
guns or something. He was a bit.
Oh.
He didn't want to be part of the. What was it? He was on a ranch with his kids, something like that, and he had guns.
Mm.
And the FBI decided they wanted to investigate. So a bunch of guys in ghillie suits crawled up, and then his kid found one of the guys in the ghillie suit and ended up getting shot and killed. And this guy in the house, he sees people
Y yeah.
investigating or sneaking up. His son is dead. It's like, well, what's a rational response?
Mhm.
Guns
I'm being
blazing.
attacked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the stories of people who shoot at police when they burst into their home in plain clothes.
Mm.
Like, you wanna do a plainclothes raid on someone's house without knocking and saying police,
Mm.
or even saying police, they're in plain clothes. I think at a certain point, someone's gonna be like, I think I might just be getting robbed here, or maybe
Yeah.
this guy's gonna kill me."
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we place too much value on people's lives now, and I think that's actually a problem.
There's definitely an impulse that is ingrained is
Everyone's
the wrong
life.
term, inculcated of, and this, I know I definitely lean that way naturally anyway,
Mm.
nature, nurture, whatever.
My nature says I'm supposed to lean that way too.
Mm,
Like, I often think about that people like me, and I think the more we talk to people like you as well, that's a large part of young people my age. The men I've spoken to my age are not like the generation before, and they're very, very willing to go way beyond the Overton window into things that they want to explore.
mm,
Um, we're products of our time, and I wonder if 30 years ago would be shaking our fists at the man and doing everything we can to be social nuisances because of the stodgy old conservatives who are trying to stifle whatever.
mm,
But here we are discussing the potentiality of like authoritarian Islamist nations and how that might actually be preferable to some of the directions the West is going.
mm.
At
There are
the
definitely
Overton window
directions I'd
opening.
prefer to that, but
Well, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
for sure. But some things are actually better than others.
Mm,
I think there's a door opening on one side of the political spectrum to outside what was once the Overton window. And I think that's going to keep going that way as things go too far the other.
well, there's
The
also
reaction is a reaction.
you keep accusing me of being this thing. What is this thing you're accusing me of? Do some research. Oh, yeah, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, I actually really wonder about that with the fascism thing
Yeah.
because I have seen several famous YouTubers who were very libertarian capitalist type people
Mm,
literally just say, "Yeah, I'm fascist now," and go off the deep end and get banned from YouTube and all that, and they have their own private Discord servers where they're way off the deep end.
yeah.
But that's effectively because you get this label: fascist, 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 Nazi, fascist, and then they go, "Okay, what does that mean?"
Mm,
Because I know school said Nazi bad. Yeah, cool. What was bad Nazis did? Well, they killed all the Jews. Well, that's bad. And they started war. That's bad too. What does that have to do with fascism, though?
mm.
Like nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Let me go explore the way people were thinking about political ideas before World War II.
Mm,
And it turns out we thought about things really, really differently.
And there are a lot more ideas around.
And there's some really, really smart people from back then who we are just not allowed to read or talk about today.
Mm,
We're not allowed to, it's just not part of our culture.
mm.
Those kinds of intellectuals have just been hidden in history of, oh, that's the before times before people got smart. Like smart people only came around after World War II or something. Of course, the boomers would teach that to all their kids. Everyone before us was dumb. Um, but we've closed these doors. And what happens when you push information underground? It festers. So the second that someone opens that door again, they get just washed over with a wave of information that they've never seen. And because it's been hidden, they hid the good stuff along with the bad. So the second you open that, someone opens that door and goes, okay, I'm going to explore this. What's back here? I know I started this with fascism, but obviously there's a lot of bad things about that. Put that to a side. There are other very right-leaning traditionalist ways of governing societies, which is where people generally end up. They generally don't stop at fascism because it's too lefty. They go into these other traditional ways of thinking, and they immediately encounter the greatest philosophers who thought that way, because of course there's greatest philosophers who think every way. And then they encounter some of the smartest people that humanity's ever produced, writing about things that they've never heard in their entire lives. And then they go, why was this hidden from me? Is it because it's good? Because I'm reading it and I know this person's not dumb. And these things make a lot of sense. It kind of matches up with what I've seen. And the second that happens, the whole lie of everything beyond this line is unacceptable and stupid, just gone. And now people are willing to call themselves fascist, which some
Well,
people have now.
yeah, so if you have that line and then you go over the line and find, oh, some of this stuff isn't stupid. It may be unacceptable because other similarly smart people found or pointed out the fallacies and problems with it. Like,
Or did
Marx was
something
not
else
stupid.
and made it, oh no, he was just evil.
Yeah, but if you say everything beyond this line is evil and stupid and just fundamentally wrong, and then you look at it, it's
Yeah,
like, okay, this is logically consistent and it's not stupid. It's like it produces hell on earth when they try and implement it, yes. But
yeah.
then you get, yeah.
But I would make the distinction that there are things beyond the line that I was describing on the right that do not produce hell on earth,
Mm.
which is why people are like, interesting, I'm going
So
that
it's
way.
weird, and it's weird that Marx is the example that came to mind is on the left and sort of acceptable in many
Yeah, he's
circles
not
these
over the
days.
line at all. He's common knowledge. He's taught in schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he wrote that he was intending to do as much damage to humanity as possible with his ideas. We have that from him in writing, and everyone's like, nah, no, we'll still teach it to all the kids. We'll just
Mm.
ignore that. He believed what he said. Sure, he did. Except for the time that he told us he didn't, but we'll just ignore that. It's almost like what you really want to do is destroy the culture of the nation you're in so that the power structure gets shaken up in a coup and you and your buddies can take all the power for yourself and live as dictators while everyone else starves.
Mm.
And then you can just lie in whatever way you want to get there because, well, there's no such thing as truth anyway. So,
Yeah. So then we come back to given that the Overton window is artificially restrained at the moment,
mm,
that's
really.
pushing a lot of ideas out onto the fringes. But then the fringes, a
I'd
lot
say it's been
happens on the
restrained
fringes.
for 80 years, just to
Mm.
say, or longer.
Mm.
Yeah, like we talked about in the artist episode, almost everything happens on the fringes. Everything
Mm.
of importance. That's where the true thinkers will always be. So
Mm.
obviously, when you step to the fringes, you're going to encounter minds that are greater than those in the center. 'Cause great minds aren't happy sitting in what's known. Back to your existential crisis of trying to search the unknown.
The tortured artist.
Exactly. A
Hmm.
compulsion. Can't help it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's what the greats do, whether their art is images or words. So when you go out to the fringes beyond what is acceptable, you are going to encounter great minds. Now, a lot of what they say may be wrong, but that doesn't mean there's not diamonds in the rough. And every now and then you'll find one, and you'll look back at the society and be like, "Hey, look at this," and they'll look at you and go, "You're evil," and then you go, "Uh, well, I know this is a diamond. You're not gonna gaslight me into believe it's not. So
Hmm.
now I'm a person on the fringes, and I'll just keep waving to the people that aren't, and just keep, come over here, and then
And
more and
now,
more people build up.
and how many of what? How popular is or was 4chan? Like, what percentage of the generation that grew up with it were actually influenced by it, first or second hand?
I don't know the number, but I know that it secondhand a lot.
Yeah,
Like
that's got to be like a quarter.
definitely double digits. Yeah,
Yeah.
20-30% secondhand. First hand, maybe 1 to 3 to 5, something like that.
Mm,
But they had probably the biggest influence on steering internet culture for the better part of a decade.
mm,
And I got the feeling that they still kind of do. They're just in different places now.
yeah.
Like they knew how to steer the ship, and they like the 2016 election in America. I think you can thank people like that for most of it.
Oh yeah, yeah. They were, what was it, doing frog chaos magic to get Trump elected, and then
Yeah,
he got
yeah, it
elected, and a lot
worked.
of them were like, "What the frick? It actually worked!"
They celebrated. I mean, I saw a video earlier today about how they figured out how to call in drone strikes in Syria through like three contacts. So they found a guy who knew a guy who knew a contact with the Russian military, and then I think it was ISIS at the time was releasing like videos from training grounds. So 4chan being 4chan was like, I'm going to find exactly where that is on the map. And within like
Oh,
half an hour, a team of like 30 people were like, it's here. All right, send it to that guy. Gets it to him. He sends a message to him. He sends a tweet to the Russian guy. And then a video the next day shows up at that spot getting airstriked.
oh,
And they did it a bunch and they were celebrating. They're like, yeah, we got the terrorists. And then what is the bike lock professor? That was them. I don't know if you remember
no,
that. Berkeley riots. Oh, it must be 2016, something like that, or a couple of years later. It might have been Summer of Love. Don't remember.
mm,
Um, they were assaulting people. It was the Milo visit to Berkeley. That's right. They were assaulting people who were supporting him outside. Dude comes up, full Antifa black clad mask with a bike lock in his hand, with the big, lock on the other end. Comes over the crowd, whacks a woman over the head with it, and then disappears on
one of the
camera.
big metal D ones.
No, no, it's like a flexible one with
Ah,
a twist lock part, so the heaviest bit on the end, like a big whip.
ah,
And yeah, they found him within like a day or two, and he was a professor at the college. And he got fired, of course, for assaulting
yeah,
someone. I think he got charged even.
yeah. It's like the comedic version of that was Shia LaBeouf and his flag.
Yeah, they really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
He will not divide us. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, it's like you see videos of people on the like it's a game where here's a random photo and they've got to click on a world map where they think it is. It's like two
Yeah.
kilometers away.
Yeah, some people are way too good at that and they're judging it based on like the dirt around it. Some people are really good. And then the other
Yeah.
half of it is like someone makes the memes. And obviously the virality of memes is based on their effectiveness,
Mm,
which means that somewhere there's going to be one or two people who are really, really, really good at making the kind of thing that spreads.
mm,
And they're really, really good at making the kind of thing that spreads while also sprinkling in their own message.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty confident that most of those were the 4chan guys.
Yeah, yeah, the left can't
Yeah,
meme.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And as much as probably, military industrial complex wanted to recruit them, they wouldn't do that. They'd rather make fun of those people. Hence the Fed meme.
Yeah. And now you have an entirely new dialect coming out.
Yep.
And was it someone there was a comment I saw about some kids explaining to their teacher the subtleties of written text in the sense of like yes full stop, yes two full stops, or
Yeah.
different
And
brackets or
that's
question mark
that's
placements
like
and
basic stuff from when we were a kid. It's gotten
mm,
so intense now. Like it's a different language almost. If you're typing
yeah.
typing to someone, you have to do it in a different way, particularly to express comedic effect. You have to go
Mm,
way further than you would go in spoken word. And I feel like there's almost more room to poke fun and make play, not because, oh, the
mm,
person's not face to face, so I'm not feared of consequences, but more because for something to not come across deadpan, it needs to be more extreme. Therefore, the
mm,
entire comedic half of the conversation is tilted into more extreme. And because of
mm,
that, everything is tilted into a little bit more vulgar than it would otherwise be, a little bit more pointed than it would otherwise be.
yeah. And known in jokes and subtle cues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it feeds itself.
Oh, there was one I got caught in, what was it? Someone said something about a shark having smooth skin. It's like, no, factually they don't. They have rough skins. And so I replied like that. And it was there was a meme about someone saying
Yep.
he had a pet shark and it had smooth skin. And then someone came in saying, no, no, they have rough skin. You must be mistaken. No, I have it right
Yeah.
here. And it's like,
It,
so I accidentally played the other role. And
yeah,
the guy
it's
then said,
like the
oh,
the thing that Trump did with
hmm?
mispronouncing nuclear, so that everyone in the whole world would correct him, and then everyone else would look at the media and be like, "Why do you care? What does it matter? What the fuck are you doing?" Or the catch-up thing.
Hmm?
He goes to a restaurant, he buys like $180 steak, and he's like, "I want it well done with ketchup." And of course, everyone makes fun of him. And then all the people are at home who can only afford like the $5 steak from the supermarket that's tough as shit. They're cooking it well done and they're having it
With
with
ketchup.
ketchup and they're like,
Yeah.
the fuck? What are you? Just let me have my steak, man. Turn on my evening news and they're like, this is really bad. You're stupid if you eat steak with ketchup. Fuck you, I want my steak.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's falling for the bait.
Mm,
And there's nothing that the internet generation loves more than a good troll. It's
mm,
like just fishing all day. Oh, you fell for it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one can predict the creative responses of that many people playing with ideas until they find something that works. Because something that
Yeah.
works will then explode.
Yeah.
And these
Yeah.
days, you'd need a translator to even understand their conversation. Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the
like the
people who
basic words like Riz. It's like it's old
well,
by now. I know.
the thing I think is really funny with this, um, I'm not sure how true this is, but this is my personal belief. As far as I know, the way the cultural influence of generations go, you have one goes up, one declines, and then they sort of overlap a bunch. So right as Gen Z is at the peak of cultural influence, millennials have effectively zero now. And then every year from now on, the next generation will start gaining some influence and our generation will start losing some, or my generation, sure, yeah. Um, when it comes to all of these new words that have started popping up in the last year or two, my theory is that they are words that we would use ironically as a joke to make fun of the kind of brain rot dumb people who just say whatever the phone tells them to. But the younger people don't understand that level of irony or sarcasm, I suppose. So they say it explicitly. They go around telling their teachers about the Riz and how cool it is to be whatever insert word we made up to make fun of people like that. And I'm wondering if this happens throughout the generations, but I think particularly it's happening this time. That it's a
Oh
broken
man.
language on purpose that's used to make fun of other people who would use it seriously, but B, as like a self-deprecating humor in chat, like misspelling words on purpose in chat. Are you
Yeah,
right, mate? Kind of thing.
yeah. Oh, it's also like taking someone makes a joke about you at you, and then in order to make it backfire, you take it literally and run with it.
Yeah, yeah, and then it just is the cringiest thing in the world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
And
feel
it's
like that's what's happening to the kids, the Gen Alphas or whatever. They're running around using these words that were a complete joke as serious, and everyone else is going, okay, okay, that's fine. We'll just double down, make fun of them even more, and just away it goes.
yeah, yeah. And then you've got oh, Brett and Heather Weinstein in their book talked about how what's it, we're in a period of hyper novelty, so things are changing too fast for us to adapt. This feels like the adaptation's speeding up. Like it normally would take a few generations to settle down the culture and adapt to the new changes, but with the internet, with the amount of stuff happening in that sphere, and the amount of
And the
things being tried
siloed
out,
and the siloed conversational spheres.
mm,
Like
so
different
many different.
generations use different social media,
Oh yeah, yeah, so many
and then the
different.
language on each one of those is different. So
Mm,
therefore, each group will not be held back by having to communicate heavily with the group above. Whereas before that, yes, people had hung out with people their own age, but they still had to talk to the older people all the time. But on the internet, you don't have to because you're in your siloed group and you can talk all the time, all day and night because you always have your phone.
And
And
you've
that,
got subgroups within there, each sort of
mm,
tackling the problem of life in their
yep,
own unique ways, and the ones that work will cross pollinate other ones, and then they'll try
yeah,
variations and hyper
yeah. The
Darwinian.
worry, the worry is if we go too fast, we end up in the Tower of Babel thing.
We're not there
And
already.
okay, yeah, yeah, but worse, to the point where literally no one understands each other. But we are kind of there where
Hmm.
half the country doesn't understand the other one, and that's political. But we'll get to the point where that's not just one way, but 10.
Hmm.
And yeah, there's no recovering once we get to that point. Hopefully, it's just like you say, a hyperspeed version of adapting to the problem.
Hmm. But there's
But it'll just
also
leave the elderly behind. Ugh.
there was
Well, we're
a
gonna leave. We're gonna have to leave them behind whether we like it or not.
yeah.
I don't know if we want to touch on that because that's dark as hell.
Oh. Well, I was just thinking of there's a guy game developer who seems to have become popular on YouTube, so his clips show up, called Thor. You've probably come across him.
No.
Okay. He wholesome, you can do your thing. Here's some basic ways to approach problems type stuff. And he talked about how they'd done a thing, uh, a Minecraft stall at a convention or something, and they had one computer with a controller and one computer with a keyboard, and none of the kids knew how to use a keyboard.
Yeah.
So they took the keyboard away, got a controller. And then 80% of the kids were going up and touching the screen
Yep.
because they'd only played on a
Touchscreen.
tablet.
Yep.
And so like most of the coming generations didn't learn typing. They didn't learn things that
Yeah.
we think of as basic.
Well, you probably heard this from your parents a little bit, but maybe not as much as I did. But there was always this comment of, well, don't worry, when you grow up, your kids will school you about technology too. And I'm thinking, no, actually, they won't. I don't think they will at all. Now, maybe the intricacies of social dynamics for their generation, but that's the case with every generation.
Hmm.
But we've made technology so easy to use because we've designed it for 3-year-olds and 85-year-old grandmothers
Mm,
first, and then everyone else second, which means that you don't have to learn anything about the behind. Like, what would happen if you took the average 8-year-old and gave them like a Unix laptop
no idea.
or something running Linux?
Yeah.
And they're just going to sit there and they go, I have no idea. They won't get very far at all.
Soon
Like they
it'll
may not have
be
ever used a desktop class operating system ever.
yeah. Soon it'll be just talk to GPT-10,
Yeah, and
and
it'll
that's
do all the
everything.
actions on the things. Like Apple's doing that this year. They're bringing out models on their phones that can take actions on the user's behalf. And then you just tell the phone, hey, I want to do this, and then the thing does it for you.
Mm,
Natural language interface, which I'm not against, to be clear. I think Star Trek was right in that prediction.
mm,
You tell the computer, hey, computer, I want to do this thing. Computer does it.
mm.
And hey, it opens up the door for more people who have the skill to operate the things behind the scenes to still have job security.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But then those generations are going to age out.
Yep. Yeah, and then you get to that point of the heroes of the giants of the past had magical things with buttons who did magical things, and everyone was fed and hungry, and never hungry, and everyone was happy. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped working, and we didn't know how to use it anymore.
Oh man, I
Like,
wish that didn't sound so scarily realistic. Like there's another guy
like
who,
everything is icons. Everything
yeah,
is icons now. Nothing has words under it. Nothing's really written in English. You can search for stuff with language, and that's about the only other way. But everything else is represented as a button and an icon that does
mm.
actions.
Well, to take 3 steps removed from that, there's a guy who his maintains power stations, and I'm talking small individual, small river hydro stations.
Mm,
And he made a comment about there being he's 50 and he is the youngest on the crew.
yeah,
It's like the
yeah.
Chat
Like
GPT
we don't
20
celebrate.
can't run a power station,
No,
can't
we don't
fix it.
celebrate engineers anymore.
Yeah.
Like, what was the thing about blue sky science back in yonder days? The most rich and high status people on the planet were physicists because the
Mm,
government just gave them unlimited money, and because of that, they had the massive amount of status, and they were
mm,
looked at as being like cool, daring, and brave. And then they took away all the funding, and now they're like nerds in a back closet, and we make fun of them on Big Bang Theory.
mm.
Yeah, that's not a great message to send to the kids. What does everyone want to be? They want to be a YouTuber. They want to be a TikToker. They want to be an OnlyFans model. They don't want to be, you know, an engineer or a physicist or a mathematician or even a politician or a
There's,
lawyer or a doctor. Nothing. And even if they did, it won't matter because we don't have children anymore. There's no more kids. Everyone stopped having them.
there's
So it
going to
doesn't
be a hell
matter
of a
what
filter.
they want to be if there's no one there to do the thing.
God, I can just imagine, like, what would it,
Like, what's going to happen when our entire population needs to be in hospice care and there aren't enough doctors to service their own generation, let alone everyone in hospice care?
oh, that just
Let
feels
alone
20 or
paying the
30 years
taxes.
out. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
that's no time at all.
well, Canada's working on some solutions to that where they just say, would you like to die now? Okay, here's an injection. You just don't feel very happy today? Okay, you can have the injection.
Yeah, as long as you're above 50, something like that.
I don't think
Like,
they've got
and
that
that,
restriction.
yeah, well, I know, but
Yeah.
they'll be doing the math that'll basically only affect people that age anyway. But we have that too. We have medical assisted dying.
Okay.
I
With
know it's not as extreme. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's like for now. I think it's always happened. It has always happened that, like, here's the patient who is suffering deeply, and I can keep them alive longer, but if I just give them too much morphine, then they will
Yeah.
go to sleep and be comfortable.
But here's the thing, you wanna be logically consistent in preserving rights, then the assisted suicide's wrong. But, um, if you wanna be yeah, but the other way to do that is to just be like, "Well, we're not gonna pay for your care anymore." So,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
just
Which do you
go home
prefer?
and go home and die, I suppose.
That's what happens instead.
Yeah, that's the other option. So it's either lethal injection or, "I'm sorry you broke your hip. We can't do surgery on you, you're too old. And even if we could, we don't have the money to do surgery on every 80-year-old who breaks their hip. So just die, I guess.
Here's some
Here's some
painkillers.
morphine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Here's some morphine. Go hop in a bed somewhere and say goodbye to people and just wait. Maybe don't eat for a couple of days or something. Yeah, that's horrible. But like I said before, we place too much value on human life.
that's
This
something that's
will
worth
be,
diving into a little.
yeah.
You want to make a
I
controversial
keep coming
statement.
back to yeah, I know. I keep coming back to a comment, a discussion that had between two people I respected greatly way back in the day. And they were talking about they were very capitalistic minded people and they were concerned about the communists. And one of them said to the other one, "I'm really glad that there's idealistic people like you. You would be the kind of person I want to run the society after we save it. But I also believe that in the meantime, you need people like me who are willing to throw people out of helicopters to achieve that. And then afterwards, you can put me on trial and put me in prison in your perfect world. That's fine. But I don't think that you get there through your perfect action." And the other guy was obviously disgusted by this to a certain extent. I think he kind of had a certain agreement behind the scenes, but
You
there's a
don't
point of,
stay there without the helicopter guy either. Not in that situation.
yeah, well, that's the problem. That's the precipice you travel through. But at a certain point, you cannot establish a great civilization without carving it out of the rough, and you don't do that through niceties.
Yes.
Every great civilization was born out of bloodshed. Everyone. And at a certain point, when your options are the extinction of your civilization or bloodshed to save it, which do you prefer?
Mm. I
And
think
then you
that
have the thing of how can you prefer your life or your culture's lives to that of another, or your political leaning people's lives to that of another. And at the end of the day, um, I think that that's what human beings are evolved to do:
mm,
preserve my life, preserve the life of my children, preserve the life of my community, preserve the life of my culture, as all of these things will effectively preserve the life of my genes. And I will prefer that over to people that are far away.
yeah,
And then you just have to have an evolutionary game of whichever one is best suited to the environment is the one that succeeds. And then you can judge the ones that don't succeed as unfit. And yeah,
mm,
that's not compassionate or caring at all. But that's, as it always comes back to in the modern time, I'm sorry that that is painful for you to think about, but that is what reality is. And you can deny it as long as you like, but reality won't change to fit the ideals that would make your teenage self comfortable with the state of existence.
mm. And
Sorry.
saying that there's too much value on human life now is not saying that it is not valuable.
Yeah,
There's a like saying too
yeah.
much is like the value is not infinite, right?
And there's a
There is
distinction on who's valuable.
mm,
I don't mean that based on innate inherent characteristics. I mean that based on action.
Yeah,
Like,
you.
we place the same value on the criminal and the innocent,
Mm,
and we shouldn't. We place the same value on the old and the young, and we shouldn't. Now, when you get to the comment of we place the same value on the weak and the strong, it's like, you're walking into dangerous territories there.
that's a far more
But
subjective judgment.
yes, exactly, and you can break that down by categories like sane and insane. Sure, we can go that one. But when it comes to like, okay, like genetic defects, when we say in here, that gets into very eugenics
Mm,
territory very quickly, and we want to avoid that, obviously. But when we're at the point of we have to make a determination between a value judgment between one person and the other, and it's like, well, that person committed crimes, and that person was the victim of it. One life is worth more than the other. Sorry.
mm. Yeah, but at the same time, we need to be careful not to go too far down that road because the first people that Hitler killed were the ones in the insane asylum under
Exactly.
the logical argument of these people are in a living hell, let us gently ease them out of it.
Yeah, and we're not far away from doing that now, just to be clear.
Mm,
I agree. We need to be insanely careful we don't go too far, but we also need to be insanely careful that we don't go far enough because that is just as much hell and death. We have this attitude that doing nothing is
mm.
an option.
Well,
You
it's like,
make a choice one way or another, and
yeah.
each one will have a negative outcome. If you go too far that way, obviously hell and death and pain and horrible.
Mm.
And the fear is the responsibility for doing that. But doing nothing pushes you the other way. And that's hell and death and pain and horror. And you are responsible for that because you did nothing. You're not
Oh,
absolved from inaction.
this is answering the trolley problem by saying, I do nothing, I'm not touching this.
It's like, no, that's a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're still choosing to kill someone one way or the other. So you better choose the better option.
Choosing to turn and run away screaming is an answer. You're choosing to let the trolley run over five people.
Well, yeah, it's like the situation in New York where the girl got raped on the subway and everyone just filmed it because they didn't want to get involved. Like,
Mm,
heyo, you could have stopped that person, but you
mm,
chose not to. That was
mm.
a choice. That wasn't inaction. That wasn't you staying out of it. You are responsible for her undergoing that torment. And my point is, yes, we could go so far the other way that it's dangerous and really bad things happen. And hey, I have a genetic defect that is really crippling, and I'm going through hell with fighting with the hospitals at the moment about it with my youngest daughter. So I would actually be one of the first people up on the chopping block if it went too far. Like, I understand the risks of it more than most people. But I think that we are dangerously too far in the direction of inaction.
Mm.
And that any action in that direction, even if we overshoot a bit and have to recorrect, would be better than the trajectory we're going on now.
Mm. It's also reflected in an individual view towards your own life. Like you say, oh, in one sense, it's the Uber health and safety. Like, thou shalt not do anything dangerous without a 3 hour meeting beforehand and ticking off every possible risk management strategy. And it's like,
Yeah.
there are arguments for working safely and looking at the statistics of, okay, this country, like New Zealand's health and safety record is worse than other countries for apparently equal effort. So there's reasonable reasons to put effort into improving it and improving the safety culture of no, don't just use the
Okay.
dangerous thing without properly fixing it and say she'll be right.
Oh,
But
yeah,
at the
yeah, you
same
should see
time,
what happens on farms, man. It's unreal.
yeah, yeah, like grinders with no guards. It's like, okay, yes, sometimes you need to take the guard off to get into a awkward position, but it's a peeve of me because I like my fingers and like it's just like
Yeah,
if
or
you
like
have to take the
hanging a
guard off,
group to put nails in.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And when people were used to that environment, there weren't that many injuries. If you get someone who thinks they're safe and then doesn't acts as though they're safe, and then
Okay.
falls and there's no safety mechanism.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. But what we've always forgotten for a very long time is, okay, but what's the cost of safety?
Mm.
Because
What's
there
the
is a
cost of
cost.
cotton
There's
wool?
always a trade-off.
I think there's safety about being a competent person, like a person who knows how to drive competently, driving on the
Yeah,
road,
well,
slowing down appropriately where
yep,
there's ice spots and so on,
that comes back
versus
to the meritocracy thing.
yeah, trying to cotton wool it and make the self-driving car handle ice spots.
Yeah, no,
Or
the going too far in the direction of safety has a tremendous cost to the culture and the economy. And
mm,
it's that same thing of we're going to make things more safe because there's no downside to that whatsoever.
mm,
Yes, there is. Everything's a trade off. You can say that we're
mm,
too far in one direction, but when you only tell half the story, you become an ideologue. And when you only tell half the story, there's no counterbalance, and you'll flip the scales to infinity and things will go wrong.
mm.
Because what's that thing that virtue is always in the balance of two vices?
Yep.
Yeah. But when you say that, no, there's only one vice and the other side is perfect good, then all you're going to end up doing is going to infinity on the vice other side of the vice scale. And just because that vice side sounds good, like
Mm,
keeping people safe, great branding, doesn't mean that it doesn't produce hell when you go that way to infinity.
mm,
It, there's the idea that anything raised to the power of God becomes infinitely horrible.
ooh,
And the idea is don't ask for a wish, don't ask for a miracle from God, because if you get infinite leverage on anything, it will break everything and make hell.
mm.
And I think that applies for anything. I mean, just creeping up from the edge of the frame is like transformer models waving, saying, "Hi, AI, infinite leverage."
Yeah.
Um, I need to go. This has been great, but I do need to go. I can hear my baby in the next room, and I need to go and feed her.
Yep.
But
Oh well.
thank you for another great show. And now I gotta figure out what the hell to call this as always.
Balance.
Um, there you go. That'll do. You
All right.
heard it here first. Balance.
Bye.
See everybody next week. Find the button.